My name is David Jordan Jr., and today I am talking with Kavon Ward and Ashanti Martin, co-founders of Where Is My Land? Where Is My Land is an organization that raises awareness about land that has been taken from Black citizens of this country, and they put forth valiant efforts to get the land back for the families and their descendants. How are you all doing today?
I'm well.
Very good. Thank you, David.
I really appreciate you all taking time to talk about this very important organization and all the great things that you all have done and will continue to do. The first question, I want to talk about your backgrounds. Both of you all are working on projects with this organization that you co-founded that is very important to Black citizens of this country that have lost their land. And my question to you all is, where did the passion come from in your background? Like, give us insight on your background and how that led to your current point.
I mean, I guess I can start. So I am not only the co-founder of Where's My Land, I founded Justice for Bruce's Beach, which is the organization responsible for the advocacy efforts to get the land back to the Bruce family here in California. But prior to that, I was an advocate. I was a poetic activist on the East Coast before moving to LA. And what sparked that was probably about in 2010 when I was confronted with racial discrimination and retaliation in the workplace. I was a part of a national nonprofit organization. I was a lobbyist for them, and ultimately sued that organization for racial discrimination and retaliation. And then for me, that's when my eyes was open to just the level of how your life can change as a result of racism and trying to combat it, right? So I fought against it in the organization. I was ultimately fired. I sued, and for 5 years, I was blacklisted in DC. I could not find a job lobbying anywhere. No one would hire me, no one would touch me. And during that time is when I felt like I needed to get out the anger and the frustration because, you know, I grew up in Harlem in poverty, being told that all I had to do was work hard and go to school and get an education and I could be whatever I wanted to be. And so that was the first time in my life I had realized that that is not the case, at least not for a Black person in America, right? And so my therapy while fighting the lawsuit was writing poetry. It's something that I'd done for a long time. But then it was also something that picked up a lot when Trayvon Martin was murdered. And so I just started getting these stanzas in my sleep, and I would have to sleep with a notepad and a pen next to me to capture it immediately as I woke up. And then I ultimately created pieces like I Am Michael Brown, I Am Trayvon Martin, you know, I Am Sandra Bland. And it was very therapeutic, but it was also emotionally taxing, you know? And so for a long time, I performed those pieces on the East Coast, DC, Maryland, Virginia, New York. And I made a pretty decent living doing it, but it was just rough. It was a lot. And I wanted to escape just the burden of having to perform these pieces that talked about the murder of Black people by the hands of police. And so I decided, because it had opened up doors for acting for me, I decided to move to LA to pursue acting. And for me, I was running away from advocacy, right? I was just like, this is exhausting. I'm tired. The lawsuit is over. I want to just further pursue acting. But then when I moved to Manhattan Beach about 4 years ago, I guess it called me back. And you know, that's when George Floyd was murdered. And again, just pissed off about, you know, a decade later, another Black man dying by the hands of police. And then ultimately two people forwarded me a blog post about Bruce's Beach. And I just felt that rage and anger build up inside of me again, like it had done before when I was fighting that lawsuit. And I just couldn't believe that the city that I'd lived in for so long was co-founded by Black entrepreneurs, and that their land was stripped from them. So spiritually, I was connected to the case. And I ultimately held a picnic on Juneteenth of 2020 with a couple of other women I had started a group with to shed light on what had happened to the Bruces. And then two of the family members were there. And I told them that I would do whatever I could, use whatever resources I had to ensure that there would be policy change for them, for their family to get the land back. I didn't know how it would happen. It just, the spirit moved me to say that. And so I think, to answer your question, surely it's just that I think racism is what drives me, right? Like just the lack of respect for Black people, and the lack of, just the dehumanization of Black people is what moves me and inspires me. And it's not just in land reform, it's in everything in this country, and so that's it. I'll give the floor to Ashanti now.
Thanks. So interestingly, I also, right around the time that Kavon, found out about Bruce's Beach and had that picnic, I was on medical leave and had left my job because I also was experiencing retaliation and discriminatory behavior. So I had a little bit of that same, fighting spirit, and just, really understanding that we're all up against something, whether it's like on the job or whether it's in the streets against police. But I will say, as far as land and my background, I am part of the United Martin Families of Jenkinsville, South Carolina. And a member of our family had done some genealogy and uncovered that my great grand parents and uncles and aunts, the men in the family who had been enslaved on this plantation in South Carolina, had been granted many acres of land upon their freedom, and they had also been taught how to read and write and do bookkeeping, unlike a lot of Black people during that era. So I started to make the connection as to why why my life outcomes were so different, why it was just taken for granted that I would go to college, for example, why a lot of people in my family had gone to college. One of my cousins, who I don't know personally, but is Charles Bolden, who was the first Black administrator of NASA under Barack Obama. So it's just really, I started to understand how what happened so long ago affects us now. And sort of connected to that, on the flip side, I read an article in the Washington Post that detailed the history and the life of George Floyd and his family. And I learned in that article that George Floyd's great grandfather, Hillary Thomas Stewart Jr., had acquired 500 acres of land in rural North Carolina in the late 1800s, but that land was stolen by white farmers. So it really made me think about, the impact of that violence and the impact of that loss of wealth on a person's life and their trajectory, not only through their own lives, but, intergenerational. And it really made me think about, would George Floyd's life had ended the way that it did had that land been able to stay in his family? I feel pretty confident that it would not have. So I really just started connecting these puzzle pieces. And I've always been very interested in social justice and, Black civil rights and things like that. And then it just so happened that upon learning about what Kavon was doing in Manhattan Beach, that you know, I saw an article in the New York Times about what she had been able to accomplish. And although the land, it was on track to be returned. And at that point, just seeing how quickly things were moving under, you know, what she had been doing. And as it turned out, we had a mutual friend. So that's how we linked up. And, you know, my interest was really to see the work that she was doing in Manhattan Beach replicated across the country, because we all know that it wasn't just the Bruce family that had land taken from them. So that's really what motivated me. And I think the combination of our backgrounds, like Kavon mentioned, she has worked in policy and nonprofit and advocacy, and I've been a writer and a journalist, and I've worked in marketing and communications all of my life. So I think that our backgrounds complement each other, but, you know, spiritually, you know, and sort of like with regard to our passion, that we're coming from a similar place. So I just think it was a moment in time that let us know that this is something that we just have to move forward with, because the moment demands it.
Definitely. And the one thing in talking to you all and myself and other people that I know is it's not talked about as much, but the realization that many Black citizens in this country encounter racism that is continuous within the workplace. And people don't talk about that. They might talk about specific cases, but it's more common than not. And so many times people encounter it, but they do nothing to combat it. They just accept it as what it is. And I think that is what plays a factor in it continuing to take place with everybody. And
yeah, I would say, I just want to jump in and say that I wrote an article for the New York Times about LinkedIn and how Black people in the workplace and professional workplaces had started to talk more about those experiences. And I think that along the lines of what you're saying is that sometimes we feel like we're all alone, and we feel like it's just happening to us because, like you said, people don't talk about it. And then when we start sharing these stories, you see how really widespread it is. But once we start talking about it, then we start to understand it's not a problem with just us. It's not a problem with our performance or what we bring to the job. It's something that really is systemic, and I would argue is a holdover of, you know, just the relationship of Black Americans to labor under, you know, how it's constructed in this country. So, yeah.
definitely. And that, coupled with a sense and a knowledge of history, seemed like a great blueprint for what you all are doing in helping people obtain and then become more aware of what's going on. Because with generations past, the other generations have passed. So if people don't talk about, hey, my grandfather, my great-grandfather had this, and actually know that, there won't be an avenue for pursuit of that justice that's needed for these families and descendants.
Absolutely.
So as the structure and the blueprint of this organization was created, what were some of the obstacles that you all encountered collectively and then individually?
I mean, I think that, you know, starting out with Justice for Bruce's Beach, it kind of prepared me to foresee what some of those obstacles would be. And so we really haven't had many obstacles as of yet, right, Ashanti? But I will say, outside of like being able to raise the funds necessary to do this work, but I would say that, you know, during my time advocating for the Bruces, there were death threats, you know. Really? I mean, well, I'm not gonna say death, that there were threats on my life. There was infiltrators in organizations. There was, you know, I was Amy Coopered by my neighbor. I had to ultimately move. There was just a lot of pushback from government officials, local government officials, because they were complicit in just the threatening of my life, right? There was legislative pushback. There was just this need to be very vocal and loud and make a lot of noise in order for folks to really do something about it. There was just this trying to get this work done without any resources. So I founded it, and I brought along someone. I had one person doing social media before we could scale up, but everybody was volunteering their time. And so there was this struggle with trying to balance working so that they could earn money to do the work, and then doing this work in conjunction with their jobs and living their lives and their family responsibilities. So that was always an obstacle, just trying to make sure that things could get done in the midst of having so many other things to do so that folks can earn money. But outside of that, I would say that's it. That's all I can think of right now.
I would say that with Justice for Bruce's Beach, I think that, all of the obstacles that Kavon described, we have it was never, these situations were not easy and were very difficult, but now where we're going forward with Where's My Land, we have a bit of perspective, and we haven't run into too many obstacles, but I anticipate that we will. I don't think that, as we gain steam and as we begin to take on some of the people and the institutions and the organizations who have been complicit in land theft and who benefit from it now, I anticipate that there are going to be people who are unhappy. I think another obstacle, a big obstacle to what we're doing, is the research. So we are an organization that focuses on getting land back through research, advocacy, and technology. And for a lot of these, records are very hard to locate. In a lot of instances, records have been destroyed, often deliberately, to obscure the facts that families once owned land. And the fact that, this is nationwide. So that's an area that I anticipate being a big challenge. And I know that many of our families who have reached out to us have been doing their own research for a long time, and they've run into walls doing that. So my hope is now that they have the steam and the power behind them through the work that Kavon's done and that the resources that we are marshaling right now, that they'll be able to barrel through some of those obstacles. And yes, absolutely, funding is a big obstacle, but also opportunity. We believe that Black people should be paid for their labor, right? This movement is not about self-sacrificing. This movement is about reclaiming land, reclaiming wealth, and reclaiming opportunity. So, but just the scale of what we're trying to do is just really going to require a lot of resources. And the last obstacle, I think, is knowing that we are going to encounter pushback, is just really making sure that we have the support of the public. We have the support of Black Americans in communities across the country who want to see not only us, but want to see the families that we're supporting succeed and want to see them make gains, material gains. So those are just some things that, the hope is that we are good enough at anticipating these challenges so that when they come, we can meet them. So I have confidence that we'll be able to do that.
Definitely. And you spoke of something.
Can I just piggyback off what Ashanti said in terms of just like the funding and organizations not supporting us? I think another obstacle I foresee is this notion that organizations will provide financial support to try to muffle us and to try to silence us, right? Or to try to make us push forward their agenda. And I know that happens a lot, like, especially when I think about record labels, they bring on an artist so that they don't compete against one of the other artists that they want to push forward, and they kind of silence that artist. And I can foresee that being an obstacle for us too, if we're not very careful about who we partner with and who we receive and accept funds from. So it's just trying to manage that and to balance, making sure that we are standing in in our integrity, and also in what we want to do and in our mission. And then also making sure that we have the support to do that, like real support, not folks who are just going to support us if we do something the way they want us to do it. Right.
And one of the topics that you all just mentioned is research. And with this country, there were so many Black areas and Black neighborhoods that were essentially taken or lost over the years. In your research, have you seen a common tactic that was used, or was each city, state, county different in how they confiscated this land or forced these Blacks to move out of their areas?
I think the common denominator is violence, right? Violence was used heavily. And then policies like eminent domain. Those are the ones that stand out to me the most. What have you realized, Ashanti?
I would absolutely say, if you go, the farther you go back, the more likely it is that the means by which land was taken was outright violence, murder and lynching. Many lynchings happened because, a lot of land was taken as a result of lynchings. And I think that's part of the story of, the legacy and the history of lynching that is often untold. And I think that that's part of what we want to do. So I think the farther you go back, the more likely it will be that, there were violent land takings. I think across the South, it is more likely that there was violence in the land takings. But absolutely eminent domain, that is how the city of Manhattan Beach took the Bruce family's property and other families in that area. And
also intimidation, right, Ashanti? Just like intimidating people.
Yeah. So even beyond the policies, like, eminent domain, eminent domain was the, how it was taken, but there was a long period of intimidation and terrorism against the Bruce family and the other families around that land and the visitors to Bruce's Beach. So, I would argue that all of it boils down to violence, right? All of it boils down to whether the maneuvers are, intimidation, terrorism, murder, or policy, eminent domain. All of it is a form of violence because it's all theft.
Right. But I was going to say too, like when we think about this intimidation, getting people to flee their land so that they're not able to pay the taxes on the land. And now the government is able to take it and sell it or give it to another person because the taxes aren't paid on it. But how can these people pay their taxes if they've been uprooted from their lives, their jobs, they've had to flee to save their lives, and now they can't pay the taxes on that property. And now, it's not theirs anymore. It's just completely taken from them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And again, I want to say congratulations on the justice received for the Bruce family with Justice for Bruce's Beach. And for the people that aren't very familiar with it, could you tell us about what exactly happened, when it happened, and how we got to the point of getting the land back for them?
Sure. And so about 1912, Charles and Willa Bruce, Black entrepreneurs, some would argue that they were co-founders of Manhattan Beach. They lived there. They bought a parcel of land that they used to sell merchandise so that they could afford another piece of land, right? And so what people don't realize is that first plot of land, they ultimately ended up paying significantly more for it than their white counterparts in Manhattan Beach. But they bought it. They saved up enough money. They bought another piece of land. They had there was a resort, not a Black resort, but just a resort that a lot of Black people from across the country frequented because they wanted to enjoy leisure by the water. And as you may know, up and down the coast, Black people didn't have access to any of the beaches outside of Inkwell and Santa Monica. So Bruce's Beach was a place where Black people frequented, like not just families, there were gangs, there were like other Black entrepreneurs, there were athletes, there were famous people that came to enjoy leisure there. They had a bathhouse, a dance hall, a restaurant. They were thriving. And then the white citizens, their white neighbors didn't appreciate that. And so they intimidated them. They burned a mattress, flattened tires. And then ultimately the city of Manhattan Beach, the city council members and the police and the KKK, you know, the city actually had like 10-minute parking meters. So anyone who would visit there had 10 minutes, what are you going to do with 10 minutes, right? They had 10-minute parking meters to kind of to kind of stop them from going to visit. There was, the beach was roped off for half a mile in both directions. So in order to access it, they had to walk a half a mile in either direction. They just could not go straight to the beach. And so even though the family had, or the couple had, you know, been intimidated and, you know, had to overcome all of these obstacles, people still, they encouraged other Black people to buy in Manhattan Beach so that they could build this community, right? They were going to have a school there. They were going to have a railroad station come through there. They were planning on building it out so that other Black people could have, you know, the same opportunity to purchase. And then when the intimidation and the KKK and all that stuff didn't work, the city of Manhattan Beach decided that they needed to do something that would legally get them off of the land. And so they condemned the land and then through eminent domain ultimately took it. And they were in court forever trying to fight this. They wanted $120,000, I think, to leave, and ultimately only got about $14,500, and were forced to out of Manhattan Beach and then moved further east and were relegated to being cooks in someone else's kitchen and ultimately died shortly after that. And so the descendants, you know, the living descendants, they tried to fight to, you know, over the last 10 years to get some type of compensation for, you know, civil rights violation, human rights violation, but to no avail, right? The only thing they got was that the park was named after them. The name was changed to Bruce's Beach, but the park is not the land that was owned by the Bruces. The park was actually owned by a couple of other Black families and some white families, but the property the Bruces own is what is now called the lifeguard training facility on the Strand between 26th and 27th. And that property is owned by the county. And so I think that was our saving grace in being able to get the land back to them, because ultimately the land was owned by Manhattan Beach. Manhattan Beach gave it to the state gave it to the county. And the county is who is deciding to give it back, not the city of Manhattan Beach.
It's a lot of history that not known. Like some people may know. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I just wanted to add quickly that today you will hear people, residents, and you know, leaders in Manhattan Beach saying that Manhattan Beach is not a racist city, but I believe that the percentage of the Black population is under 1%. So, you know, I have trouble squaring away how that in that current reality is not a direct result of the racism that Charles and Willa Bruce and so many other Black families, you know, experienced. So I think people really need to question when they say, oh, you know, this is not a racist place. You know, the way that you have, it is rooted in racism. So that's something that I hope that people begin to understand. But unfortunately, I don't think that the leadership of Manhattan Beach are,
No,
speaking
the
to that.
leadership of Manhattan Beach didn't even want to apologize to the Bruces. They voted against issuing an apology to the family. That's how racist. And I would also add to what Ashanti said is that, yeah, not only is, the population of Black people in Manhattan Beach less than 1%, I don't think it has ever been more than 1%. Like, I think we need to marinate on that a bit.
Yeah, definitely. Like that's the history that people don't know. And that's why it's important to know that. And Manhattan Beach is one of many places across the country where that can be the total dynamic for it. Like all we know now is who's there. And unless the history is passed on from generation to generation, people think it's always been like that. And if you think it's always been like that, nothing will change with it.
Exactly.
So from the time that you all started working together and everything, what has been the best piece of advice that you've received that's enabled you to continue to go forward in everything that you're doing?
Rest is resistance. I mean, I think we do ourselves a disservice if we don't get the rest necessary to do this type of work. This is emotionally, mentally, physically, financially taxing, right? And so if we don't rest, we burn out. And if we burn out, then we're no good to anyone, and they've won, right? The other side has won. So it is important to rest because rest helps with the resistance.
I mean, as far as me, I don't really know if I've gotten any advice specifically because we are doing something that really hasn't been done before, certainly on this scale. I would say all the best pieces of advice I've received have come from Kavon. I definitely, one piece of advice that I've received, not only pertaining to the work that we're doing here, but pertaining to just sort of rethinking, how we work in this country, is to resist the urgency of white supremacy. I think that the urgency that we often feel is a construct, and it's a construct of white supremacy. And we're working on problems that are 100 years old, so there's not a lot that it should not be shocking that these things can't happen overnight, but I think that some people do. So I would say, along with rest is resistance. I would say that, anyone who's ever told me to just keep putting one foot in front of the other, that's what I try to do every day. Every day brings something that just feels unprecedented, and feels like, wow, this is, what we're doing is really big, and it can sometimes feel frightening. But I just listen to my ancestors. I really do feel that ancestors are calling on us to do this work, and so all I do is really listen to that. So that's been, and that's not so much advice that I've received from anybody else, but I guess it's guidance from those who have come before me, and those who have resisted before me. Some members of my family, some of my cousins were photographed. They participated in the Woolworth lunch counter protests in Greensboro, North Carolina. And so I think of them often when I think about what we're doing. I think about how they put themselves in harm's way. They put their bodies in harm's way. So that's really I just kind of listen to those who have come before me, and just keep moving, put one foot in front of the other, and and learn from all of the lessons that Kavon has learned from through her experience with Justice for Bruce's Beach, and just knowing that, just looking at the result in just over a year, was able to go from learning about this hidden history to actually doing something historic about it. It's really, I reflect on that a lot.
Exactly. It's all about building one day at a time and keeping going forward, and being strong in your mission and your beliefs. And when you do that, other people will fall in place to support and push forward. How can the world connect with you all? People that may have a story that's similar to Bruce's Beach, how can they reach out to you all? And also, how can people support your mission?
So they can visit our website, whereismyland.org. We have a link to a registry form where people can submit their claims to land. We have received more than 100 inquiries and submissions via that form, as well as other stories that have come through via Kavon after the publicity with Justice for Bruce's Beach. They can also donate on that page. So through our fiscal sponsor, we're able to offer tax deductible donations. So that is absolutely a way that people can support. They can follow us on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and like our content, share our content, follow us. So those are the three main ways. And for families who are looking for our help, we are currently trying to build the infrastructure to be able to help as many of them as possible. And that takes time. So that those donations and that support are really crucial to our ability to help as many people as we can at the same time, because that's our goal, is to not just help one family at a time, is to create a movement and really see transformative change now.
Well, Kavon and Ashanti, you all are doing amazing work. You're an inspiration to many people. And not only that, you're educating people on things that they don't know about. And you are history. Like, you are history and you are making history. I applaud you all for that. And Ishe Magazine will support you all in everything that you're doing. And I appreciate you all taking time today to speak with me.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, we appreciate you as well. Thank you.